later on. Okay,
Okay.
bye. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So this paper was about apa tadi? Okay, this paper was about investigating the students' behavior when they were given different types of multimedia when they learn. So what they do is that they analyze the students' behavior based on log data, and this log data they collect and then they give codes to every log data, and then they use content analysis to do the coding. So this is also another example of using content analysis method to analyze log data. Not only discussion script, but you can analyze log data and giving them codes for every activities that they have. Okay. So what is, that was the examples of studies in our area, which is educational technology, and how it was been published in many journals. This method is a legit method. I did not invent this method. Okay, so content analysis is a research tool that we can use to determine the presence of certain words, themes, or concepts within some qualitative data. So the things that you collect is qualitative data. Okay, but the way you analyze that, you can analyze your qualitative data quantitatively. So in short, you are doing actually quantitative activity, because later on, after you have analyzed your discussion script, for example, then you're going to give meaning. For example, your design is very good. This is what example of the feedback, for example. And then we give coding to that type of feedback. So we say, okay, this kind of statement shows that the students are giving support to their friend. So we can count how many supports have been given throughout the discussion text. So when we start counting how many coding of support being given in the discussion script, that's when we start quantitative analysis. Although the data that we have is qualitative data. As I said just now, you can also analyze interview scripts. Interview scripts is qualitative data. But when you start analyzing that and you start segmenting, giving segments to all the discussion script and give coding, and you start counting how many codes are there, that becomes quantitative analysis. You start to quantify your qualitative data. Okay, so I give you an example of this one is the article that was published in 2024 just now. So this article in which I said that the students have to give feedback to each other's work. And then this study is about, they want to explore how student high score student, and how is it different than the low score student when they give feedback to each other during online peer assessment. So I summarize, they have 3 research questions, because it is important, if you want to choose to use content analysis method, you have to know whether this method is suitable for your research. So that is very important. It's not simply as, I want to use this method because you think you want to use it. So as a PhD student, that is always not a valid reason for you to embark on something, and by now you should know about that. So this is an example of research questions that we have in the paper. So for 3 different research questions, they employ 3 different data analysis method. So for research question 1, they want to know the way the students give feedback, whether it is in the category of effective, or whether the feedback is in the category of cognitive, or whether the feedback is in the category of metacognitive. So they want to see how high scoring student, HS, give feedback in terms of affective, cognitive, and metacognitive to their friends, and how is that different than students with low scoring. So when they want to answer this research question, they use the quantitative content analysis method in which we are going to explore after this. The next question is that they want to try, how different is this pattern? Okay. And finally, they want to see whether the behavioral pattern among the high scoring student and the low scoring student, is it different when they in terms of social interaction? So they use the social network analysis method. So there are 3 data analysis methods being employed in one single article. So that's why I said that I assume this is a one PhD research. Okay? Maybe half of the PhD research. So the way in which this researcher is using 3 different analysis methods, but based on one data collection activity. So they rely on the discussion script only, the feedback. They collect only one single data, which is the online discussion script. But they analyze that in 3 different ways. You see, to answer research question 1, to answer research question 2, to answer research question 3, they only use one single data, which is the online peer assessment feedback that the students write to each other. Based on that one single data collection, they use the same data but analyze that differently. They see the data from different perspective, which is using 3 different data analysis methods. So this is what we call as learning analytics. So learning analytics is the technique where you analyze your existing learning data to assess either academic progress. You want to know whether there is a problem within the existing data, and usually these involve the large amount of data. So employing multiple ways to analyze one single data, that is what learning analytics is. So that's why my sharing today, I relate that to learning analytics as well. But learning analytics is just a description in which you analyze data to understand a certain phenomena. That is just simply what learning analytics is. But content analysis is an example of processes that you carried out for learning analytics. And we are going to look into detail on how we can do content analysis. Okay, up to that point, do we have question? Any questions so far? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
My PhD topic is I'm working on student motivation and the use of learning management system module higher institution. And it's a quasi-experimental design. And then in the analysis, there's an interview, and the interview use coding.
You use
and
coding.
I change it to, yes, I use coding. And I change it to content analysis.
Okay, it
Is it
depends
possible?
on your research objective, what you wanted to achieve. If your interview is a very big part of your research, then I would propose for you to use content analysis. However, if your interview data is just to support existing other data, then I would not suggest for you to use content analysis, because it is just a waste of time, because you have to go through several steps to employ content analysis. That would be my opinion. If
Thank
your
you.
interview session is to answer one big research objective, then I suggest for you to employ content analysis. But if it is not, you can stick with thematic analysis, giving
It is not. It
themes
is just
to your
supporting
script.
the other. It is supporting other research questions. The interview.
Okay. Then I would suggest for you
yeah.
to stick with the current way of analyzing. Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Jazakallah.
Now, so this is the findings because I want to give an idea on after you use this method, what it looks like in your data. Okay, so as we saw just now, there are 3 research questions. And research question 1 is being answered using content analysis method. Research question 2, they use another method, which is lexical analysis method. Research question 3, they analyze that using social network analysis method. Okay, I can teach you all 3, but it will be another session. But today we are going to focus only on content analysis. So research question 1 is about, so they answer research question 1 by analyzing the discussion script using content analysis method, and this is the finding for research question 1. So what they do is that after they have do the coding to the online peer assessment script from the social media, they count. This is what I said, that your data is qualitative, which is in the form of discussion script, but they quantify the discussion script by counting how many codings of meanings for affective, cognitive, and metacognitive. They break it down into several other categories. This is the coding scheme. Okay, so from this one, so they take the student's discussion script, they code that to either A1, A2, A3, C1, C2, and so on, and then they count the frequency, what is the mean, and what is the standard deviation. So this graph is the distribution of affective, cognitive, and metacognitive behavior based on the coding that I have done using content analysis method. So if you see here, among the high scoring student, which is in green, they have 112 coding of A1, here, which is category of supportive. And compared to low scoring student, they have 118 codes of A1. So the way we present the data immediately after we carried out content analysis is usually we present the frequency of codes. Okay, and then we can calculate the mean, we can calculate the standard deviation, we can see if there is significant difference between high scoring and low scoring in terms of affective, cognitive, and metacognitive. We can do that as well. So this is the research question 2. After they have counted the codes from the discussion script, from the content analysis method, then they do the lexical analysis method. So this is another method. So lexical analysis method, and this is the finding. This finding is about explaining after someone giving support, what behavior that follows next. So this is what we call as sequential behavior. In sequence, what is the next behavior that happened after another behavior has happened? That's why you see arrows here. A2, if we look at A2 here, for example, A2 means, what was the coding scheme just now? A2 means negative impression here. That is A2. That is showing negative emotion to the work. Personally, the design of the work is not good. So this is an example of the feedback that the students give to another friend. So they give negative emotions to the work. So here, what they're trying to say is that what kind of high scoring student and low scoring student sequence of behavior when they comment on their students' work, when they comment on their friends' work. So this one, for example, what they try to illustrate is that among the high scoring student, which is on the left, this is left, right? Okay, which is on the left, among the high scoring students here, after the high scoring student give negative impression, they give another negative impression because the arrow is repeating itself. You see, the arrow goes back to the circle. This is different than the low scoring student here. We have A2 and the arrow pointing to A3. A2 is negative impression and A3 is irrelevant impression. So I think that's what it means by A3. Irrelevant to effective. So this is what it means. A3, the meaning of the code is the work is reasonable and meets the requirement. So this is an example of comment that maybe they give to their friend. So when you have A2 pointing to A3, this means that among the low scoring student, after they give negative impression comment to their friend, they followed that comment with irrelevant effective comments. So this is what it means. I'm not going to explore more about to explain more about this, but this is just to give you an idea why content analysis is the first important step before you can explore other data analysis method. So if you think that you want to do lexical analysis, if you think that you want to do social network analysis, first you have to do content analysis. Because content analysis is the first step of you coding the raw data into segment of codes. Whether it fall into A1, whether it fall into A2, A3, and so on. So that first step is called content analysis. After you have grouped all this discussion script into separate codings, then only you can start using also this data, analyzing that using social network analysis and lexical analysis and other analysis that come after content analysis. So this is the second analysis that they do, which is lexical analysis, that is identifying the sequence of behavior. Okay, so when an arrow, I said just now, an arrow, when it comes back to its own, that means the behavior is repeating itself. So last step, what they do is that to answer the final research question after they do content analysis, what they do is that they do social network analysis. So this is to see who is interacting the most, who is giving the most feedback, and among the high scoring and low scoring. I think the green ones are the high scoring, the red ones are the low scoring students. So if you have darker green, that means the students are giving more feedback compared to the other feedback. So one circle represents one person. So this is what it means in social network analysis. So finally, in this research question, they want to see how these people are socially interacting with each other. Okay. So this is the final step in their paper. So this is I think this is a very easy to understand, and that can illustrate 3 different data analysis method. If you want to, I put the name of the article here, you can get that from Science Direct. So to give you a good idea about how they use content analysis, lexical analysis, and social network analysis to answer 3 separate research questions. So that was just an example. Okay, now, although I said that content analysis is being used commonly in our area nowadays, in educational technology area nowadays, but there are quite a lot of critics about this method. Number 1, we never established the standards. This means to say that, for example, if I say, if someone says, if we want to analyze a script that says, your design is very good. So for me as a researcher, I can classify that statement as coding A1. But if I call another friend and another friend read this text, and another friend can say that I don't agree with you, I think this statement belongs to code A2. So we have a different opinion about giving coding to specific transcript. So this is you know, it shows reliability issues. For example, the way I interpret certain messages is different than the way other person is interpreting the messages. So this can be an issue. And other than that, there are also a debate around the idea of the validity and reliability of the way you interpret. For example, although we can appoint another person to analyze the same messages, and then in this content analysis method, we always have to agree to only one quote. Let's say I agree that message number 1 can be given code A1. Another rater, another coder, analyzed the same message and said that, no, I disagree with you. This message, you can categorize that in A2. So if we have disagreement in the content analysis way of analyzing text, we have to agree unanimously. So we, both of us, who initially did not agree with each other, we have to debate until we agree to only one code. That means someone has to let go of his or her opinion so that finally they can agree on something. So this is what we call as percent of agreement, in which we can calculate that, and we usually report that in our thesis. Okay, because reporting the percent of agreement, how much percent you agree with another person, is very important. Because when we read certain text, we can be biased. Another person, when they read certain text messages, they can also be biased. So we have to have the same level of understanding. We have to have a mutual ground for us to report on how do we categorize certain text messages. There is also a critiques on content analysis because of deciding the unit of analysis. So you see, if, for example, just now we are talking about analyzing social media comment, let's say Facebook comment. So Facebook comment, if someone give Facebook comment and we want to analyze the content of the comment, let's say this person give a comment. In one comment, they have 4 sentences. So the first sentence is, thank you, full stop. I agree with you, full stop. But I think my opinion is that blah, 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 full stop. Don't you think so? Full stop. 4 sentences. How are we going to analyze this message? What I mean is that, are we going to give one quote for one sentence, or, so that means we are going to have 4 quotes later on because there are 4 sentences, or are we going to read the whole comment as one holistic comment and give only one quote for the whole comment, although the comment has 4 sentences? So what is the unit of analysis? Identifying what is the unit of analysis that you wanted to use is important, and you have to justify why you want to use sentence as your unit of analysis rather than a paragraph as a unit of analysis, or you can use meaning as a unit of analysis. So for example, if you have a comment that has, like, for example, 6 sentences, you can say that, okay, in these 6 sentences from one comment, because we can write long comments, right? So there are 6 sentences, let's say, in one comment. You can decide, okay, from these 6 sentences, I identify there are 2 meanings from these 6 sentences. I'm going to give quote to the meaning. So you will have 2 quotes based on 6 sentences in only one Facebook comment. So you see, um, identifying this unit of analysis is often a critiques in content analysis because there is no standardized way. There is no right or wrong for you to do that. Nobody will say anything if you want to say that you want to analyze a message based on the meaning of it. Nobody says anything if you want to analyze a message based on the number of sentences that you have in that message. Or nobody will say anything if you want to analyze that message based on the number of messages itself. So this is also a debate in using content analysis method. But so far, because my point is that it has been reported in many research, even in the last ones I see here in 2024, they use content analysis method and it is not really an issue. This means that it is a valid technique. And I'm going to teach you how you can overcome these disadvantages or these critiques, okay? But you have to know before using this method, these are among the issues that people discuss when they use content analysis. Okay, and any questions so far before we move on? It's a bit theoretical in such a way. Okay. Any questions online? No? Do you get what I mean? Okay. All right. So, there is also a question on. Oh yes, yes, please, Shafura, your question. Or did you write that down so that I can? Or do you want to? Okay, no question. All right. Okay, so another concern about the use of this method is, for example, you can analyze a certain text messages from the perspective of so many ways. So, for example, you can choose to analyze a certain text messages from the perspective of cognitive presence, from the perspective of critical thinking, from the perspective of metacognition, from the perspective of knowledge construction. There are so many ways on how you can analyze your text messages, and nobody will say that that is wrong. So the problem is, this becomes a critique because you can use the same text messages to analyze from the perspective of, let's say, critical thinking. You can also choose to analyze that same text messages, but have the coding in terms of their motivation level. That can also happen. So there are no standardized way on how you can look at certain text messages. Okay, it depends on your research objective, what you want to uncover from the text messages, you decide. So this is very different than thematic analysis. If you use thematic analysis, it is based, you didn't specify which angle that you want to see the text messages. You just collect the text messages from the interview script, and then you come up with the theme because you think the theme emerged because it has been, the data has been populated and dense and saturated. That's why the theme, the thematic comes in. But here, you already determine that you want to see, you want to analyze these text messages from certain angle, such as from the angle of critical thinking. Then you go and find the coding scheme related to critical thinking, and then you code the text messages. So these are some of the debates as well. So this is how thematic analysis is different than content analysis. In content analysis, you have decided from which angle that you want to see the text messages. From thematic analysis, you find out the theme after the data has been saturated. That's why you say, okay, this data is inclining towards this theme. This group of data is inclining towards this theme. So you decide that based on data in hand. Content analysis, you have data in hand, you decide from which angle that you wanted to see. So it's two different ways of analyzing the data. It's totally different is totally different and from different perspective. Okay. So, okay, I talked just now about reliability. Reliability means that, you know, when someone reads the text messages, they can say that this one belongs to code A1. Another person read the text messages, they say that, I don't think so, I disagree with you. This text belongs to A2, code A2, and not A1. So this disagreement between these two raters, probably because of bias, because of personal experience, they can bring into the picture when they analyze the data. So to overcome this, usually researchers use the percent agreement. That's the easiest way of reporting the reliability value. Or they can calculate Cohen's kappa. We can also report that using Krippendorf alpha or Spearman rho. You see, Spearman rho is, you know, you always use that in correlational analysis. So what you see is that whether the correlation between inter-rater A, the coder, person A, and another person, whether the correlation is high. So if you can say that if the correlation is high, meaning to say that if I said this code is A, another person should also code that as A. So that's why you can report Spearman rho as well, the correlational value. But usually people report on Cohen's kappa value. This can be easily calculated in SPSS, or they can calculate percent of agreement. So percent of agreement is that we calculate how many codes that we have similar coding, and then we divide it by the total number of script that we analyze, and then we times that with 100. We get the percent of agreement. So we usually report these two value in our PhD thesis. Even usually this paper, they use Cohen kappa value, and I think they report on Cohen kappa value to give an idea that the way they code the messages are valid. So that means not only one person is analyzing the data, but they appoint another coder so that the way they code the messages are consistent and reliable and correct. So this is how we overcome the issue of reliability in content analysis method. So you always report on two things. I suggest report on the Cohen's kappa value. Then number two, report on the percent agreement value in the form of percentages. Cohen kappa value, if it is closer to 1.0, that means it has high reliability. So that's how you interpret Cohen's kappa value. Okay, this is the unit of analysis just now. As I said, you can choose to give a code based on the complete message. Is it based on number of sentences? Based on the number of paragraph? It depends on you. It doesn't matter, but you have to justify. Okay, so this is the overall process of content analysis process. So first, as I said, you set what is your research objective. Okay, and then you see whether content analysis method can help you to solve your research objective. And then you choose your coding scheme. So as we see just now, the previous article, so this is the coding scheme that they use. Okay, so they said that they want to investigate the behavioral pattern from dimension affective, how students give support to each other when they give online feedback, or in the forms of cognitive, or in the forms of metacognitive. So they have dimension affective, cognitive, and metacognitive, which I cut out. Okay, and then they have, I think, 1, 3, 8, 11. They have 11 codes altogether, categorized into 3 different dimensions. Affective has 3 codings, cognitive has 5 codings, metacognitive has 3 codings. So this coding scheme, how do you get it? So there are so many coding schemes already available in research. You can just study and use them. And it also depends on what point of view that you wanted to see. So this paper, they wanted to see from affective and cognitive and metacognitive point of view. If you want to have a coding scheme specifically for critical thinking, there are also already available coding scheme in research that you can directly use to analyze your data. But if you want to build your own coding scheme, that is also can. But it will consume a lot of your time. But if you think that it is too novel, that you need a new coding scheme, you can always develop one. Okay, so my suggestion is to look around in existing study. Is there any existing coding scheme available in previous studies that you can use? So you choose your coding scheme. So first step is set your research objective. Second step is to choose your coding scheme. And then you do your data collection. Okay, so after you have collected your data, then you do the iterator coding process. So you have the text messages. So you start segmenting your text messages. You decide on what is the unit of analysis, whether you want to analyze the whole one message and give only one code to the whole message, or you can decide you want to give code to respective sentence. Let's say I'm going to give one code for one sentence. Or you can use meaning as the unit of analysis. This means that maybe 4 sentences have only one meaning. And then you give a code to that meaning. So you can do that as well. So after you have collected your data, you decide on the unit of analysis and you start your coding process. So I put here as iterator coding process because we need to appoint another person to do the coding as well, aside from us as the main researcher. Why? As I said just now, this is important to establish the reliability issue so that we have another person to check whether the way we code, the way we think, and the way we categorize the text messages is similar like someone else analyzing the text messages. So this is what we call as iterator coding process. And then we write the reliability value in terms of percent of agreement just now and Cohen kappa. That was the easiest way of reporting the reliability value. And then we write out the reporting. So this is the overall content analysis process. It's not that complicated. And usually when we write your research objective, this is usually the common research objective in which you can use content analysis method. If your research objective is about analyzing students' ability to perform programming, you can try to find a coding scheme and code their behavior when they do programming. Let's say, so you can find this, you can do the coding based on, you can record their behavior and then you give coding to specific behavior based on video recording. So you can do that. Or if you want to analyze students' level of cognitive engagement, what you can do is that you get a coding scheme that categorize cognitive engagement behavior, then you code the behavior based on the coding scheme of cognitive engagement. So as I said, I put all these dimensions in blue because you can have many ways of looking at your data. As I said just now, you can decide on how you want to, which angle you want to interpret your text messages data. Okay. Then, after you have study and you have understand your research objective, as I said just now, you can choose existing coding scheme or you can develop your own coding scheme. Okay, so what coding scheme is, it contains a set of code in which you have given your definition and description. So here, this is my coding scheme that I used when I did my PhD. This coding scheme is about describing how students construct knowledge. So this is the coding scheme that I use. So I want to analyze what level, what kind of feedback, no, not feedback, what is the quality of discussion that the students demonstrate when they do online collaborative learning session. So I give whether they ask questions, whether they give answers, whether they give information, whether they give information with elaboration, whether they give information with example. So I have different codings for different way of they discussing with each other. So I give them codes and then I write the description and I give an example of behavior that demonstrate what kind of codes that I wrote. So this coding, I didn't build that from scratch, but what I do is that I take existing coding scheme, but I modify certain codes. So you can modify the coding scheme. So if you take a coding scheme, take a look at the codes, whether the codes is aligned with the things that you want to investigate. And then if you think that you have to modify certain codes, so you can do that. Okay. And then, so this is how you can build a coding scheme. Building a coding scheme is quite time consuming. So that's why I suggest for you, because you can build another PhD in building a coding scheme. But I suggest for you to use the existing coding scheme when you want to answer your research question. Okay. And remember, if you do coding to your messages or to your behavior, to your data, only make sure you only give one meaning, one code to one sentence. Meaning to say that I put here as mutually exclusive because this is very important. So sometimes when we analyze our data, it is very important, it is distinctive from each other. So make sure I put here as someone, if we see the behavior as standing, is it that person is standing and running? I give the example because someone who is standing can also be talking. That is, you can give two codes, standing and talking. So that means one behavior has two meanings, has two codes. So this is very important, establishing this. Do you want to make it mutually exclusive? Which is, it is suggested that you make it mutually exclusive, in which to say that, okay, if someone is standing, that we are going to code only standing. But if that person is standing and talking, we're going to give a different code. So this is very important, establishing this, okay, when you analyze your data. Okay, then you collect your data. So if you want to use content analysis method, I said just now, you can use this method if you have text messages. Other than that, you can also have interview. Our friend just now asked about interview scripts. So you can analyze interview scripts using content analysis method, or you can analyze video recording session using content analysis method. For example, I am observing a 30 student, a classroom of 30 students learning in front of computer. One person is scratching the head, one person is typing, one person is staring at the computer monitor. So each different person has different behavior when they are learning in classroom. I can use this video recording and give a code to each behavior that the students are demonstrating. So this is what it means that we can use content analysis to analyze video recording as well. So, but again, you have to determine what kind of behavior that you wanted to look at. Is it sneezing? You want to give a code on that. Is it laughing? You want to give a code on that. Maybe what matters to you is what happens in front of the computer. Maybe what matters to you is what happens when they talk to each other. So it depends on what is it that you wanted to investigate, of course. Okay. So certain behavior in video recording, it doesn't matter to you, and you are not going to give a code to that behavior. So what I'm trying to say is that you still have to decide what is your research objective is, and you can analyze that accordingly. Only analyze behavior that matters to you from the video recording. So you can also use content analysis method to analyze video recording behavior, as long as you have a coding scheme. And then you can categorize that behavior into specific coding scheme. You can also collect data in terms of think aloud. Are you familiar with think aloud method? Do you know think aloud method? No. Think aloud method is, for example, our experiment is that we give our students certain tasks. And then this is usually happens when we do experiment related to mathematics. So what we do is that, okay, we give the instruction to students. So the student has to say out loud what they are currently doing. Let's say, okay, now I am taking number 3 and I plus that with another number 3. And then I count. 3 plus 3 is 6. Then I take 6 and then I minus 2. Saying this aloud is by the participants of our experiment themselves. That is think aloud activity. So we record these think aloud scripts and we analyze that. So, however, think aloud has a lot of criticism as well in collecting data collection, because it's very dependent on the way the students are thinking aloud. It depends on what they wanted to say, although we give them guidance on what they have to say. But think aloud is suitable if you have very small sample, and then you can do more with them in person so that you can dig more. Okay, what else you do? So we can guide them. Now what are you doing? So we can ask them so that they can voice out what they are thinking. So this is what think aloud is. So you can use, if you collect data using think aloud method, you can analyze that data using content analysis. So we can give code to the every think aloud script that the participants is saying out loud. Okay, that is think aloud method. And of course, you can also do content analysis to screen recording behaviors that you have. So in our area of educational technology, we do a lot of screen recording activity. Let's say, for example, your research is about understanding how students behave when they are learning with video. Whether they pause, whether they play, whether they didn't do anything on the screen, and then whether they fast forward the video, whether they click on previous to the video. So we record all this screen behavior, and then we can analyze that using content analysis method. So we can say that, okay, for example, if someone fast forward certain content, then we can conclude that that person is, maybe the retention is low, things like that. So we can give meaning to different screen recording behavior. I'm talking about the watching video just now. But there are many other screen recording activities that you can collect, that you can do, and then you can analyze that using content analysis method. So this is just an example of a view that you can use to collect data, and that data you can use content analysis method to analyze the data. Any questions so far at the data collection method? Questionnaire. What kind of questions that you ask on questionnaire? Is it Likert scale question? Likert scale, like I agree, I strongly disagree. Okay, it is very unlikely that we use content analysis to analyze Likert scale data. The best way to interpret Likert scale data in survey is, of course, using inferential statistics. You identify the frequencies, and standard deviation is the most efficient way of interpreting what it means rather than content analysis. Okay, our friends online, do you have question? Okay, no? None so far? Okay, so after you have done your data collection, it's either you collect their interview script, you collect their online discussion script. So you do the coding process. So when you do the coding process, as I said just now, appoint at least 2 coders. One is yourself, appoint another friend to analyze the script as well. So what they do is that they have to code the transcript independently. Okay, they cannot do that together. If not, then you are influencing the way I'm thinking. I am influencing the way you are thinking. So so you have to do that independently. And then after you have done that, then you meet to compare the result of your coding. And then you discuss on whether you agree. Okay, I agree for this one. I agree this code C1. For this sentence, I don't agree. This is C2. Why you don't agree? Then you discuss. Okay, how many codes that you agree on, how many codes you don't agree on. Then you calculate the reliability value in terms of percent reliability, in terms of Kohn kappa between the two of you. You can have more coders, of course, but when I did my PhD, I did my coding with another friend, and that friend, I pay my friend so to do that coding with me, because it is time consuming to do this activity. But at the end of the day, my friend is also using content analysis method, so she also appoints me to do coding of her for her data. Then we mutually agree that we're going to just help each other. So I'm coding hers and she is also coding mine. So we do these activities together. That's why you need a friend when you do your PhD. Okay. So so we do that, and then we calculate the reliability. And then so you report your value of reliability in terms of percent of agreement and Kohn kappa just now. And then you do the reporting. So we saw just now what you want to report. Normally you start with reporting the frequency. How many code C1? How many codes are there in A2? Like this one. Like the way this paper is reporting. They produce a graph, a bar graph, describing the frequency of every code. This is the simplest way of reporting the output of your content analysis, number of coding. For this article, I think they have come up with 1,400 codes, I think. It says here, we collected 1,431 data points from 4 rounds of online peer assessment covering a 57-day period. So they analyzed 1,431 messages. Okay, and from that 1,431 messages, I think they narrowed it down to 1,400 because they say that certain messages are noisy and it's not valid, incomplete messages, so they left out those messages. So they end up with 1,400 valid messages that they analyze, and that messages, they have come up with this number of codes. Okay, they categorize that into A1, A2, A3, and so on using coding scheme. So that's what they found here as I read it. Okay, and they present that in the form of bar graph. That is the simplest form. Okay, so you report on the frequency. You can put this in table as well, doesn't matter. But maybe for visualization, so they report on how many high scores have A1, how many low scores student have A1, the number of codes. Because they analyze the coders, they differentiate the students, they categorize the student into high scoring student and low scoring student. And they want to see the pattern of this group, two group of student, how they give feedback to each other. So this is the simplest form of reporting. But as I said, it doesn't have to stop here. You can always use another analysis to advance on your content analysis method. You need to start with content analysis if you want to do lexical analysis or social network analysis. It has to start with content analysis. So as I said, the final step is you report the data. So you can report that in the form of frequencies and you calculate the mean. You can also go to identify the significant difference between students of high scoring and low scoring. You can do t-tests and so on to the data as well, after you have quantified the qualitative text messages. So that was it. The whole 6 steps of content analysis process, if you want to do it for your data. This is just my paper, I think, but this was so old in 2014. So I give my students five problems, and then they have to discuss to solve these problems. And then the way what I do is that I analyze their discussion script. So it's very straightforward, and I use this coding scheme from Van der Meyden in the year 2005. So I analyze the discussion scripts according to these categories. And then there are also many other coding schemes, such as this one, Gunawardena 1997. Many people use this coding scheme to analyze critical thinking. So if your research is about critical thinking, you can use this one to see to what extent students are thinking critically. So they have code, they have description, they have example of script. So usually it is the same format. You have code, you have description, you have example of transcript. This is another example of coding scheme. Okay, and this is my result for the paper that I wrote in 2014. I want to categorize how students in the medium performing group is different than students in the high performing group, and how they are different in the low performing group. So this is just how I illustrate them. This is another example of people performing sequential analysis after coding scheme, after content analysis, and so on. So usually you can find out patterns. If your research is about finding patterns of behavior, it is suggested that you do content analysis. It will help you in identifying pattern later on using sequential analysis or social network analysis. But you have to start with content analysis. Okay. I saw this question on chat. Okay. Would you suggest any software to do content analysis? You can do this coding using NVivo. But for me, it is still a tedious process. I like to do it manually in such a way that, I take a highlighter and then I highlight. So this sentence is reflecting which code. But you can do this using NVivo. So you can determine, you can highlight certain text and then you use tagging to tag the code to the specific sentence. So you can use NVivo for that. Besides using Excel, or I do it manually on paper. So you can also use NVivo. About the two coders, is there any certain requirement for the coder? No. What you want to do when you meet another coder, what I do was that I have a friend, but you have to educate your friend about the coding scheme. You have to explain, okay, this code CHV1, what it means. You have to go one by one. Do not left them hanging or reading only the coding scheme. You two have to have the same understanding about what the coding scheme means. Then only you go independently in separate room, and then you meet maybe 1 month later to come up with the codes. But both of you has to agree on what the coding scheme means. So you have to educate your friend about the coding scheme. That is very important. In my opinion, you can appoint anyone. But it's good that if they have some idea about understanding about reading behind the lines. No, not reading behind the lines. Reading, like understanding the certain sentences beyond what is being written. So reading in between the lines. Yeah. So at least you get someone who can understand text messages, who can uncover actually what is the underlying meaning of certain text messages, it's good that you can find that person so that they can see that text messages or that video recording in a different perspective. Okay? So find someone that is critical so that they can see different point of view rather than you doing it, because you can be biased. Okay? So that would be the criteria. It's just not really any criteria that I think nobody reports on the criteria of the coder, but you have to educate that person about the coding scheme. That is the most important thing. Okay. All right. Any other question? Okay. If there is no question, what I do is that I encourage we can try the yes, I will share the slide. Okay. This is a simple activity. When I do workshop, I usually do this. You know the game Solitaire, right? This Solitaire game. To stop sharing. Okay, this game. So what I usually share screen. Okay, so what I usually do is that I prepare a coding scheme. So you can play a game to just experience how to record data and then to analyze that data using coding scheme. So what you can do is that you have in front of you a coding scheme. Okay, I'm going to show you the coding scheme. So this is, for example, a coding scheme that I developed, a simple one. So the code FF is when your friend turn up the first card, you give FF. So when your friend move an ace to the foundation, you give the code A. When your friend expose a hidden card in solitaire game, you give the code E. So all this behavior of playing a solitaire game, for example, you can record, you can code that behavior. So when I expose a card, then I jot down. So this is the behavior, is called E, for example. Then we have all this behavior until we win the game, for example. Then we can count. How many behaviors are E? How many behaviors are A? So then we report on the frequencies. But the thing is that if 2%, so for this activity, usually you can practice this with 3%, because 2% have to watch the 1% playing. So 1% has to play, another 2% has to code the behavior independently. And then you can try to see what is the iterator of the two of you when you code each behavior of your friend playing the solitaire game. So this is a simple exercise that you can do if you want to try coding a certain behavior. And this data collection method, I would say this is screen recording. You can always screen record the whole gaming session, and then you can look again and give a code to every step, to every behavior that your friend do when they want to complete the game. But we're not going to do that now, but I'm just suggesting to you. So that would be an easiest example of data collection method of you giving a code to certain behavior that happens on screen or that happens maybe in text messages. You can always do that and take a coding scheme and analyze that behavior. Okay, and have that independently with another friend, and then compare the result, calculate Cohen kappa, calculate percent of reliability, and then report the frequencies, the simplest way of doing it. Then explain which frequency of behavior is higher, which one is lower, why do you think that is high, why do you think that is low, and things like that. Okay. Any question? Any question? No? If there is no question, that is all that I wanted to share. You can always, if you want to read more papers related to that do content analysis, they don't use the word content analysis in the title of the paper. But usually, the paper that studies the word, you can find papers such as that use the word behavioral pattern in online learning. So the word behavioral pattern, usually, many researchers use content analysis method to analyze behavioral pattern. So you can use the keyword behavioral pattern when you want to search the paper that use content analysis method. If you go to Science Direct, you can use, as I said, you can use the keyword behavioral pattern. So usually so if you see here, behavioral pattern, okay, online learning, for example. So this is the first paper just now that I was discussing just now, published in 2024. Here is about video learning analytics, investigating behavioral pattern. This is also, they do content analysis as well, but they do data mining at the end of it. So usually the papers on behavioral pattern, they use content analysis method to come up with behavioral pattern. So if your research question is about investigating behavioral pattern, then you are more likely to use the this content analysis method. Okay, I'm going to share the list, the attendance link. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Any question so far?
Yes, Prof. Is it possible for a researcher to combine two methods for the analysis, like the content analysis and interview at the same time?
Yeah, sure. That is what that's the trend nowadays, to combine several methods to analyze one data. That's what we call as learning analytics. So as we saw just now, you can collect only one data, but you analyze that one data from multiple perspective using multiple method. So of course, you can do that. The answer is yes.
Oh, okay, Prof. Thank you.
But make sure also it answers your research question. That's the most important thing. If it is not helping you to answer your research question, then there's no point of doing it. Usually we use multiple method of data analysis because we want to further understand something deeply about the data that we have. So that's why we analyze that from many perspectives.
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Any other question? We have someone not from educational technology here? We have everyone from EduTech. Okay.
Well,
Yes. Okay. I have shared the. Okay, Sarah. Okay, that's a question. Coding scheme Gunawardena can also use to determine critical thinking. Okay, Rosaina, it's not that we use to determine critical thinking. There are studies that use coding scheme Gunawardena to categorize critical thinking. There are also many studies recently that modify the Gunawardena coding scheme 1997. So you can also find that. But you can also, it depends on your theoretical framework as well. If your theoretical framework aligns with what Gunawardena is doing, then you can use Gunawardena's coding scheme. Sometimes you can analyze critical thinking, for example, from the perspective of community of inquiry, COI. If any of you are studying about community of inquiry. So there are also perception that if your cognitive is present online, that means you have some element of critical thinking. So that also depends on your theoretical framework as well. From what perspective you are looking at critical thinking. if it aligns with what Gunawardena is saying about critical thinking, then you can use Gunawardena's coding scheme. So choosing the correct coding scheme is very important to make sure it aligns with your theoretical framework. What is your underlying principles in understanding what critical thinking is? Because different people can have different perception about what critical thinking is. So that I would suggest that. And if you want to use Gunawardena, there are many other new studies that has developed additional coding that expand from Gunawardena 1997 coding scheme. But Gunawardena's 1997 coding scheme is quite popular coding scheme. Another popular ones would be from Henry's coding scheme. That one analyzed about cognitive and metacognitive activities in computer supported learning. Okay, I hope that answers your question. All right. If there is no other question, thank you very much for listening. I will send this in the WhatsApp group, I think, and maybe Dr. Fazil will disseminate that, I think, as well through email. Usually, he will disseminate that through email. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Good luck with your research and data analysis. Thank you semua. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you,
Thank
Prof.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Prof. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Doctor.